bears have been known to attack man, although the fact is that fewer people have been killed by bears than in all of World War I and World War II combined.
The philosophy of transcendentalism, which you'll find in everything from Into the Wild to Walden, preaches the simple virtues of a stripped-back life. Working the land and taking in the fresh air, finding inner peace far from the concrete and chrome of the workaday world. Alternatively, if you've got more of a Southern Gothic sensibility, Untouched Americana is about as welcoming as a Kid Rock concert. An unfamiliar forest where intellectualism and morality are skinned alive by the archaic and untamed. In the right hands, explorations of these domestic hideaways touch on colonialism, geographical elitism, and the unstoppable force of Mother Nature. Or they're used as an excuse to punch down at those deemed out of touch with modern sensibilities, whilst racking up a satisfactory body count. And it's with that brand of savage survival and heckling hillfolk that Wrong Turn has made something of a name for itself amongst schlock horror completionists and curious gorehounds. Staggering onto the big screen before floating downstream to the badlands of straight-to-DVD splatter, in just 18 years, the Wrong Turn franchise has birthed 7 films, including 2 prequels, 2 reboots, and more narrative retcons than a Prince Andrew press conference. Starting with... A group of handsome students find themselves stranded in the West Virginian wilderness. As they seek refuge in the nearby woods, one by one they're picked off by the ravenous, cannibalistic locals. Wrong Turn hit theatres in 2003, and coming after the post-Scream slasher revival, but before the box office dominance of PG-13 jump scare factories, it always felt like a comparatively rustic curio. There's zero attempt at thematic depth or cultural commentary, and it's never self-aware enough to deflect from its predictable setups and payoffs. Saying that, there is a simplicity to its don't go down to the woods today fear-mongering that feels purposefully economical. It's meat and potatoes murder and misery, yes, and that's totally fine.
Shut up and listen, people are dead!
Dead? What people?
Even if you are willing to get on board, Wrong Turn is still just kind of meh. Especially when compared to the Hills Have Eyes remake that came out 3 years later, which tops it in absolutely every regard. The Hills Have Eyes has a lot to say about class struggle, atomic age overreach, savagery versus civility, and familial dynamics in times of crisis, all the while working as a pretty good blood and guts meat grinder of a Friday night flick. Wrong Turn has incest monsters, this dude who was in everything for about 9 years, and some wannabe Gap models trashing on Queens of the Stone Age.
Do you have any good CDs?
There are memorable moments in amongst the blandness, particularly a sequence where the group are forced to hide in silence as their friend is literally butchered in front of them. But a few decades removed from the fact, the most fascinating thing about this film is how such a C-, competent but far from compelling genre feature managed to brute force a series that now has as many mainline entries as A Nightmare on Elm Street. Bowing out from the mainstream after a single serving, Wrong Turn's increasingly shoddy sequels only saw home video releases from here on out. Whilst shooting a reality TV show out in the woods, a series of contestants and their punk rock Marine Colonel presenter encounter our wretched collective of bloodthirsty nomads. With generic Halloween store music played over aerial stock footage, before making a beeline for the first of many slapstick kills, Wrong Turn 2 starts as it means to go on. Bargain basement, erratically dumb fun that is both a welcome 180 from the ho-hum seriousness of the original, and an outright comedic farce. Don't get me wrong, this is by no means good. The production design, pacing, and acting are all over the place in terms of quality and consistency, not to mention the groaning over-reliance on boner comedy gags from the offset. But the biggest problem of all lies with the "are you fucking kidding me" quality of the prosthetics and makeup. A dismal problem in no way helped by the filmmakers' eagerness to show off their embarrassing efforts. Despite the sheer volume of crap gushing from every orifice here, Wrong Turn 2 coasts by on its camp, cutthroat bravado. Henry Rollins is more neck vein than man, more spit-talking drill sergeant than performance, and he commits to this lunacy far beyond what the material demands.
Hoorah.
He's just wonderfully aware of what this is, and is clearly determined to have an absolute ball with every batshit escalation and putrid piece of dialogue he wrangles like a dog playing with a Wellington boot.
And if any of those pig fucking hillbillies come around, I got your back.
Hey, bonehead! I grew up 2 counties from here. I never had sex with a pig in my life. You're not promoting stereotypes, are you, son? Outstanding! People in these parts might not take that talk too well. You might want to put a lid on it. Is that all right with you, funny man?
Yes, sir.
That's damning with faint praise, sure, but until we get to the most recent entry, it's probably the closest thing you're going to hear to a compliment. During a routine prison transport, a bus full of hardened criminals and underprepared guards are accosted by the awful ambassadors of the Appalachian Trail, and the poster boys for why a diet consisting entirely of human flesh probably won't leave you winning any beauty contests. Before I even started this one, I couldn't get past the fact that there were survivors of the first 2 films who escaped with the exact location of these yum yokels and just didn't pass that information on to the authorities.
Are you some kind of moron?
Within minutes of pressing play on this third time around, a plot hole the size of Michael Fassbender's love length was the least of my worries. One of the good prisoners here is just given Nicolas Cage backstory from Con Air verbatim. Actor Tamir Hassan, the Cockney geezer of Turkish Cypriot descent you may have seen in The Football Factory or Eastern Promises, is here inexplicably tasked with portraying a Mexican cartel boss, because not just another white dude was as close to appropriate casting as this no-effort nonsense was willing to go. There's a subplot where they all just stumble upon a truck full of money and argue over it for half the running time, so there's something for them to do before they get eaten. Add to the fact that this all takes place in the woods at night, and any sense of geography, space or setting the series had gets swallowed up by samey scenery and vapid dark. It's blatantly obvious that this entry, more than most, was created by working backwards from the question, how many ways can we show a cannibal jumping out from behind a tree so we don't have to pay for any sets or locations? Look, Wrong Turn 1 and 2 were passable at best, but they had their own kind of ludicrous consistency. The antagonistic clan used stealth, silence, and their lay of the land to pick off unarmed travellers one by one. As of this third and far from final installment, they've taken to brazenly ramming armed convoys off the road. But it's fine, seems as they're impervious to bullets, stabbings, or falls from enormous heights, because incest powers? I don't dislike dumb media or take aim at anything for being deemed too lowbrow. It's just, even for the type of tongue-in-cheek trash this is aiming to be, there are really good versions of that already out there. Like Hatchet, for example, where someone gets their head ripped in half by a cross between Sloth from the Goonies and a roid rage country bumpkin. Wrong Turn 3 is the point where this unlikely franchise stops trying and hunkers down in its shit pit of barely scripted eyeball eating, juxtaposed with softcore porn. Taking place before the events of the first 3 installments, Wrong Turn 4 delves into the brutal beginnings of this murderous group as they stalk the halls of an abandoned sanatorium. Adopting just about every bad lesson you could possibly glean from the vast pantheon of inferior horror sequels, Wrong Turn 4 is almost impressive in its commitment to missing the mark. It's a prequel for a start, so there is no tension whatsoever, because we know these corned beef looking weirdos survive, and it tosses the series' already convoluted continuity out the window in an act of narrative defenestration that would make the later entries in the Halloween saga blush. Yet, it does boast one of the few memorably horrifying sequences in the franchise. The cold open, in which these hungry lads take over the sanatorium, is outlandish, disturbing, and just the right kind of repulsive. In this all too brief flash of atmospheric carnage, we're treated to a taste of a much better film. But then it cuts to 29 years later, so we can watch these dipshits dick about in wheelchairs before getting sliced up. Wrong Turn proves better than any collection of horror films I've ever seen that even the most extreme gore can and will get boring if all you can muster is fountains of blood spewing from characters that nobody cares about. Speaking of which, back to that whole convoluted continuity thing. The reason Wrong Turn dives ass backwards into prequel territory from here on out is because by the end of Wrong Turn 3, the quote-unquote main series villains are all dead. Psst, it took me this long to realise the series even had primary villains. Apparently, the stars of this abattoir the whole time were this trio: Three Finger, Sawtooth, and One Eye, aka the Hilliker brothers. The problem being that their performances, makeup, costumes, motivations, and movements are so vastly different from one entry to the next, I honestly couldn't tell there were any recurring characters up to this point. The whole cannibalistic backstory is changed from inbred mountain men to polluted mutants to remnants of a 19th century bandit tribe, and back again so many times, none of it can possibly matter. Most egregiously, however, none of these erased and replaced plot points are ever in the service of something fun. Oh, except for this. That there is some glorious shit. Look, I just can't even with the plot this time, okay? It's a prequel, again. There's something about a West Virginian Coachella these horny kids want to go to, blah 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 blah. Everybody dies, nothing is learned, nothing progresses. Doug Bradley, aka Pinhead from Hellraiser, Hellraiser 2, and the 6 other ones he did, he's in this for a late career paycheck, which is fair enough. They set up a potential Rio Bravo but with cannibals situation, then do nothing with it, as if they were frightened of accidentally making the film better, and for some reason, the Hillikers don't really bother with eating people anymore. They just do Saw-style traps and laugh maniacally to themselves. Look, this gave me nothing to work with, so there's nothing I can possibly say about it that isn't just me reiterating how much I hated it. In this reboot of the series continuity, the orphaned Danny travels to the Hobbs Springs Hotel in an attempt to trace his mysterious family lineage. Alongside his vacuous companions, Danny comes under the spell of a pair of eccentric hoteliers and their gruesome wards, the Hilliker brothers. There are crumbs of honest-to-goodness directorial flourish this time around. Attempts are made to build atmosphere, there are editorial choices that complement the action rather than obscuring it, and by jettisoning the chronology and contradictory lore that's led up to this, Wrong Turn 6 is free to be exactly what it wants, which, lo and behold, is uncompromised go-for-broke garbage. This time out, the balmy locales of West Virginia sure look a lot like southeastern Europe. Well, that's because 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment decided to shift production to Bulgaria for budgetary reasons, and by God is it chin-ticklingly obvious. Beyond its nagging visual inconsistencies and the producer's reticence to cast anyone who can act, more than ever this feels like a transparent framework on which to hang some entrails before hard-cutting to the kind of gratuitous nudity that makes sex about as appealing as giving yourself a haircut with a shotgun. It made me long for the good old days of 2003 when the first entry kept the cannibals largely obscured, the brutality quick and barbaric, and everybody fully clothed. By comparison, Wrong Turn 6 shows someone getting a fire hose stuffed up their ass until they explode, and ends with a mentally deranged man laying a pipe with his severely maimed sister, while his family of inbred mutated serial killers cheer them both on from the sidelines. You can't really unring that bell. Or so I thought, until the unexpected but somewhat inevitable second reboot in a row, 2021's Wrong Turn. A father trudges along the Appalachian Trail in search of his missing daughter. It's here we're introduced to the Foundation, a new fascinating threat with far more than murder on their mind. You don't need to worry about major spoilers for this section, because I wouldn't want to ruin this surprising, unexpected treat for anyone who's slogged through the sheer volume of shit to reach this point. You heard me right. Wrong Turn 2021 is a decent film, and by God does that feel good to say. To be blunt, this in-name only successor feels like the first time anyone has taken a film in this franchise seriously. With that, you do lose some of the eye-rolling, laugh-out-loud absurdity of its predecessors. But what you get in their stead is a good horror film that's biggest flaw is its choice to associate itself with this series. Out with the most superficial of similarities, as well as Alan B. McElroy returning to the writer's chair for the first time since the original, this is an entirely unrelated feature. There's no returning villains, no continuity or canonical ties to the others, and only one tongue-in-cheek nod to their existence. In fact, there aren't even any cannibals, inbred mutants, or even a hint of gratuitous sex scenes. But you know what this does have? Character growth, solid acting. There isn't even a hint of violence for the first 20 minutes, and when it does arrive, it has an invention and impact not a single other moment in the series up to this point has come remotely close to capturing. A later sequence I'll simply refer to as The Dark may even wind up as one of the most effectively chilling moments in any horror this year. It's a film that has elements of The Wicker Man, the underrated Ravenous, and even Midsommar, albeit with an off-the-beaten-path American twang. Without giving the game away, the reveal of the Foundation, their history, and their antagonistic role in the film itself touches on and subverts the animosity between red and blue states, the right-wing fear of socialism, and how we define human progress through a cultural and technological lens. Still, for as much as Wrong Turn feels like a cold glass of water after slogging through a barren desert, it does have its fair share of flaws that leave it as a winning course correction rather than an unmitigated success. The dialogue and much of the supporting cast are boilerplate, and at 110 minutes, it's far longer than it needs to be. When all's said and done though, by holding on to the name and putting an arrow in the head of everything else, they've given a solid shot in the arm to a series that I thought was long past to the point of saving. When I started writing and researching this video, it was from a place of distant curiosity. I thought there must be at least some reason that the so-so horror I rented back in high school had spawned such an expansive filmography. Having binged all 7 entries front to back, I now feel further from any sense of understanding than I did before I began. Freddy has all the dimensions of dreams to play with, by turns scary, stupid, abysmal, and filled with subtext. Jason started as trash and has been content to stay in that lane ever since, a mountainous, no-nonsense machete to the face. The Hilliker brothers have no personality, memorable characteristics, or canonical through-line worth even a cursory glance. It took the 2021 reboot throwing the baby out with the bathwater to get this series back to a place beyond embarrassing edginess. The Wrong Turn series is all the proof you need that a franchise can be cultivated through sheer force of will, but this is a legacy of quantity over quality, and guts with only a few shreds of glory. A bear trap to the bum for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, and Nicholas Lair Revere, and some funky looking mystery meat for all these amazing folks who support this channel over on Patreon. So what are your personal favourite movies in the pantheon of cannibal horror, and what, if any, experience do you have with the Wrong Turn franchise? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and please take a second to like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment to help boost the visibility of this video and get it seen by the almighty algorithm. If you're in a position to do so, maybe click on the link to our Patreon in the description below, where you can get instant access to our film club, private Discord, and your name in the closing credits. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.